Hello, good afternoon. I'm so glad to see you. I'm Dr. Robin Gould, and welcome to the program here today. I think it's March 9th, I think. Yeah, we're March 9th today. So we are marching forward in our lives, and I'm glad you're here. And wherever you've been, whatever you have been going through, whatever you are anticipating, whatever's going on, just relax and be present here because the future begins now. And I'm happy that we get to have some time together and talk about a few things that have been going on. I want to cover a little bit of a news story a bit today. But first, before I do that, because I don't want to forget, I want to mention this because I know Pesach's coming up. And there are a lot of people that are really new to observing these feasts and people that love the Messiah and it's new to them. And so I wanted to just mention this to you. A very close friend of mine, Keisha Gallagher, she is Grace and Torah is her website. And she made this Haggadah. It's like the Messiah and the Passover. It's very instructional. It's, I would say, simple, which is actually very hard to make things like this. Just simple. I love it. I've ordered 10. And I just really would recommend it. You can get it on Amazon, or you can maybe contact her at Grace and Torah. But I think I would recommend that strongly. I really love it. And that is coming up. So just wanted to plug that book because I think it would really help a lot of people. All right. So why don't we just jump in, because our time goes by very fast, doesn't it? Okay, one of the very frequent themes that you'll hear me say, I mean, almost every week really, is because it's so central and because I feel like we always need a redirect, especially me, to these really basic, foundational, core main things. You know, you've heard the expression, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. Well, that is couldn't be more true with the Bible. Like the Bible is the epitome of what we need to understand. What is our core objective here? What is the Father's core objective and what is our core objective? When we understand these things of what has been disclosed by the Father, like our core objective is to love him in a way of worship, in a way with every fiber of our being, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And he says he will restore all things in his way, in his time, in ways we could never even understand. But always remembering that that's the core objective helps us understand why, what, how. Okay, these things is we should always return to our mission statement and his to get the bigger picture. And that's going to help us keep perspective. And so I talk a lot about Adam and Eve in the garden, Adam and Hava, if you know them by their Hebrew names, but they're in the garden and they wanted to be like God, which is why they ate off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is the tree of judgment. And you want to be like God, you're wanting to be the judge, right? They wanted to know what good and evil is, but only the Father knows good and evil. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't say, oh, I think that was really evil, like killing children or whatever. Of course we know. But is the person good or evil? What does that mean? That is way above our pay grade. That's only for the Father to judge and for him to restore and fix and repair and all that. He made that person. He's the only one who knows how to restore that person. Though when we love our neighbor as ourselves, we are part of his solution by his design. And so when Adam and Hava, when they ate off the fruit to become the judge, they were rejecting their humanity. That was a way of rejecting being who they were made to be. And that's one of the biggest problems we have. And as an attachment specialist, that's one of the things I'm always trying to help people and myself. It gets obfuscated in just religion. But I think I always feel like I want to refocus and funnel into tunnel vision about not rejecting our humanity by accepting, and not just accepting. That sounds like, okay, I'll give it to you, God. No, delighting in the way we were made. Because if he made us really good, then we're really good. Like we can believe that, right? That's not conceited and not righteous. That's him. That's us in agreement with him. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things I talk about from a broader perspective so that people understand that, especially people new to the channel that might wonder about the theme or the tendency of my teachings. Because when I am sharing with you here, I'm a very, grace-oriented person. I'm a very law-oriented person because the Bible is that way, right? It's grace and law. It always has been, it always will be. And so nothing that I'm ever saying should ever be construed as don't obey the Torah. That is not on the radar. It doesn't even pop up. It's not on the table. We're talking about judgment. We're talking about humanity. We're talking about attachment. We're trying to understand these things. So I always want you to know that when I'm talking, don't let that happen in your mind where you might even think that I was going in that direction of any sort of, well, you don't have to obey because we're under grace. Like, I don't believe that at all fundamentally. And I don't even think that's love. So I'm not going there. But what I want to do is I want to just illuminate a little bit something really important so that people don't veer off and wonder what I'm into. Okay. So I want to dispel the myth in any way that I would ever be teaching humanism, because I am absolutely not teaching humanism. And so I want to clarify a couple of things. Now, one thing, I'm a therapist and you know this, and behaviorism. Now, before we get into humanism, I want to just talk quickly about behaviorism. Behaviorism is something made very, very popular by B.F. Skinner. He's an atheist, and it would really replace religion in a lot of ways, though it's true. So sometimes something can be scientifically true. Behaviorism is about conditioning, and we are built that way that we're conditioned, right? Like, that's true. That doesn't replace God at all. It's just insight into part of that design he gave us so that we would be able to walk out the commandments with less effort, because it's not designed to be hard. It's designed to be wonderful. And so when you have Pavlov's dogs, you have different, very famous behaviorism models and research and stories and ways that we understand this. That makes sense, right? If we're conditioned for things. When our parents, this is an example I use all the time because it's very simple, but when our parents raise us, they'll teach us not, if we go into a store, we are not to just steal something. And when we're little children, we don't know, we want the gumdrop and we take it. But now that you've been raised, I've been raised, I'm an adult now, I don't walk into a store and look at anything that I want and just wonder if I'm going to steal it. I have been conditioned out of that thought because so many times I've walked into the store, I wasn't allowed to steal. Since I wasn't allowed to steal, I was just conditioned to stop wanting to steal. And it became a part of me as I obeyed that commandment. I am now not steal when I go into a store. That's conditioning. That's part of conditioning. That's because we shouldn't always have to be confronting decisions 24/7, all day, every day. That's not the way to live. And the Father has designed people to get into beautiful rhythms and habits and be conditioned to obey his law, right? That's not robots. That doesn't mean we're not elevated above a housefly. It means that within the physical realm, that's one of the ways that we're built by a good God who loves interacting with us and isn't trying to set you up for a constant test and challenge, right? And there's a lot of things that you do every day that you are conditioned to do, and the Torah conditions you to do. And it basically mutates the lethality out of even the idea of doing a lot of sins. And that's excellent. Thank you. Because there are things that we struggle with. We'll have our top 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever it is that we're struggling with in life. And that's enough. That's enough to struggle with. And so being conditioned, that's why it says, teach your children young and keep teaching them and never stop. And this is really important. So that's behaviorism. Now, just because I would say behaviorism is true doesn't mean I embrace the overarching idea that Skinner had that there really isn't a God. There is no Holy Spirit. We're just conditioned. We're animals. Well, we aren't animals, right? We are not. We're humans. We're not animals. But we're human. So we need to embrace our humanity, but we don't, eat the meat through all the bones. Yes, behaviorism's proven. It's absolutely proven. Behavior modification techniques are proven. They work. That doesn't mean you throw away your God just because you figure out part of the way that he created our bodies to be successful and to function optimally with the laws he gives us. Okay, it's the opposite, in fact. We declare his glory because he made us very good. He created us that way, that our bodies, our minds, everything about our lives would respond to Torah in a good way, because he's a good God. Okay. Now, the difference between humanism, okay, now behaviorism is about how we behave, right? Now, humanism, I want to talk about the difference between humanism and humanity. So we just talked about how Adam and Chava rejected their humanity. So it's a slap in the face to God, because you're like, no, I don't want to be the way you made me. I want to be you. That is a central theme to all of our lives. And he tells us that story from the very beginning, because what he's saying is, this is how people are. When I give free will is exercised, and it will be overreaching. And part of this experience that we're going to have together is you continuing to trust me that I made you just the way you need to be. You don't need to, nor can you be me. And so that's a really important theme. So I want to talk about the difference between humanity. Let me just try to see if I can find. Don't we always go through this every week? I'm telling you, I need a new mouse. There we go. Where is it? Where is the mouse? Hold on. There we go. Okay. So the future begins now. Let's start that again, because I just did a big mouse chase. Okay. Cat and mouse. So humanism. Okay, so let's just first talk about like what an ism is, like when it's attached to a word. So this would be a suffix. It's added to the end of a word, and it indicates that the word represents a specific practice, system, or philosophy. Well, humanism is a practice in that it's humanistic. It's a system for sure. It's a religion. It's a godless religion for sure. And it's a philosophy because it's explaining life. So humanism for sure is a godless religion or a godless system to explain things. Okay. Now humanism versus humanity. I don't teach humanism. I teach vehemently against humanism. That is not to be confused with humanitarianism. Okay. Just stay with me. Now, humanity, the ity, I-T-Y, that is a suffix added to the end of a word to form abstract nouns expressing the state or condition of whatever that is. So, humanity is the state of being human. Humanism is a system and a philosophy and a belief. Humanity is a state of being, which is to be human. Don't confuse those words. I will never teach humanism. It doesn't exist in my world. It exists as the thing I fight against every day. Now, Elohim created humanity. So we can celebrate humanity because Elohim created humanity. This is why you love your neighbor as yourself. You don't hate your neighbor and you don't hate yourself, because you are hating something that Adonai created, called good, and loves, right? So Elohim created humanity. Now humans invented humanism. Okay? Now, I'm going to say this, and I know some people won't agree with me, and that's fine. You're not here because you agree with everything I say. You're here to hear my take on something, and you're going to incorporate it into yours. But I'm going to say, I do not believe we are creators. I believe we are assemblers. Only Elohim creates. We take within the realm we've been given sovereignty over, which is the earth, dominion over the earth to subdue it. And we can assemble certain elements of this earth and invent something, but we aren't creators. So that might be just an issue of semantics where people are like, assembling is creating. No, because I'm not starting from scratch. I'm taking what's already there and I'm using it. There's a very big difference. And to him give all glory. Okay. Now, humanism, if we're going to give this a definition, humanism, so we talked about what an ism is. Now, what the definition of humanism properly? An outlook or system of thought attaching prime importance to human rather than divine or supernatural matters. Clearly, I'm not teaching humanism because all I teach about are divine and supernatural matters. Okay. Humanist beliefs stress the potential value and goodness of human beings, emphasize common human needs, and seek solely rational ways of solving human problems. So I do some of that in that I do discuss human goodness, but not due to human assessment. It's not our assessment that we're good, right? Humanism is putting the power in the people's hands to decide about what they are. That's not what I do. Now let's keep going. Now let's go properly. Let's define humanity by definition. The fact or condition of being human. That's what I teach. What's the fact and condition of our humanity as made by Elohim? And that's sort of the discourse we have. Like, we are trying to figure this out every day. What does it mean to be human in the presence, in the love shadow, in the glow of a divine creator who made everything? That's what we're talking about. So get that very clear with in your heart with me, so you don't ever misunderstand what I'm saying. It's very important. Now, humanism is the philosophy, okay? It's a philosophy that you are valuable because you tell yourself you are, and because you declare it, it's true, and you believe it because you said it. That's humanism. That's a godless, I can't say godless. I guess you are your own God in that way. You are creating the truth of your goodness. That's humanism. That's what it is. It doesn't require a moral compass that's evenly distributed through the people, right? It's nothing that we all set our compass to and do the same thing. It's all kind of, you see it happening, right, in our world. It's just people, there's always a shifting wall against which to measure yourself, so you never grow. It's always just kind of like whatever, or people can grow in certain ways or whatever, but it's always about really that self-worship or that self-belief, that self-dependence. Now, let's contrast that. Obedience to the command that Elohim gives you to love yourself is not humanism. In fact, it's the absolute opposite. You're outsourcing your opinion to have been made by the Creator, and you're disagreeing with him. It's acknowledging the truth that he has made it known that you are valuable. And because he declares it based on his character, his name, his abilities, his sovereignty over our lives and over all, we believe it. We believe him. Okay? Now, this is actual humility. When you believe that you're valuable, that's an act of humility. Because what are you doing? You are ascribing your opinion outside of yourself. You didn't think you got to come up with that. You are believing Elohim. You're believing him. He said it, so you believe it. When you judge yourself as not valuable, you are not being humble. That's not humility. That's false humility, which is an act of self-God. It's like, my standards about how good I am or not is above Elohim's. I have higher standards than him. Wow, how sneaky, right? We have to believe we're valuable because we are told that. Now, just because it serves you in the way that you're valuable, you come out valuable, doesn't mean it's wrong. Just because there's something good that comes out of it. And we really get kind of backed into emotional corners sometimes with religion, where if anything comes out that you've been good or done something well, like that must not be right, or everything has to be a test. But that's not how it is. There are tests, sure. But an act of humility is to outsource your opinion to what his is and work with that. And that is what I talk about. The difference depends on whom you obey the command to love yourself. Who are you obeying? If you're obeying yourself, that is carnal humanism. You've declared it. You've said this. This is an affirmation. It attracts all the good things and all good things happen. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you are obeying Adonai to love yourself, this is divine humility. And whatever in quantum physics exists as we obey him, sure, that's true. But from a completely different foundational understanding of what the gospel is. So I want to just really make that clear so people understand what I'm saying. I think you need to know these things. So that question will usually, undoubtedly at this point arise, and they're like, but aren't we supposed to shed our humanity in pursuit of the divine? So that sentence just sounds like something maybe we've been taught. And it sounds like, oh yeah, we should shed our humanity and be divine. Like, here's the answer. Let's say what Yeshua said. He says, very truly I say to you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they are born of water and the Spirit. Flesh gives birth to flesh, so being born of water, you're born a human. The flesh, you exist, right? You're a person. But the Spirit gives birth to the Spirit. That's given to you by God. That's imbued, right? Because he's divine and he breathes that grace and that breath and that life into you like he did with Adam, right? So he says, so should we shed our humanity? No, you have to be human to even have the Spirit, right? Some people might argue and say animals have the Holy Spirit. I have never read that anywhere in the Bible, so I don't believe it. That doesn't mean I don't think they're in the world to come, because I believe they absolutely are. And I think we'll see our pets. So that's my opinion. I just want to tell you that. But some people think this means baptism. No, that which of breath, the way it's worded is, unless you're born of water, you're not going to enter the kingdom of God. First, you have to be human. And then you get the Spirit. Do not reject your humanity. Take on the Spirit. Be open. Like a kid, right? So this leads me into what I want to talk about this week is I want to talk about the portion, but I want to do the Brit Hadashah portion that is portioned out. So if you're new to this program, the portions are the Torah segmented into parcels for portions, a little parcel for the year. And you read a bit each week, and we're all on track and tracking together throughout the world, all together. And I love that big, huge community brought together by the word of God. And so also for Messianic believers, of course, and they have the Haftarah, the other books. And then for the Messianic believer, we have the Brit Hadashah, the New Testament, the Newer Covenant. So we have this segmented as well. And so I want to talk about a little of that, even though I am reading a little further beyond this week, because it always seems like to bring context to something, I have to go a little further, but I want to make a point. But this week, I wanted to also cover something that's very popular in pop culture. Now, before I say this, I want to say that I know that not everybody thinks that pop culture should be discussed. Like, ever a person that's sharing something about the Torah, like, it's worldly to talk about like culture and all this here, right? But it's funny because a lot of these same people who say don't be worldly are the first people to say, when you're thinking about the Colossians, what was their culture? What was going on? What was important in their world? Like, how did they think? Well, we have to do that to some extent too in our own culture to get, where are we going as a culture? What are dominant themes we're dealing with? What are the things that we're dealing with? These are actually important things to know when significant things happen, where a lot of people are exposed to the same thing and everybody's developing opinions and talking about it, and it's everywhere. So I think it's very helpful I'm going to dive into a topic that's been very, very covered in pop culture and in all culture and really kind of globally, but very much in the United States and Britain. So the interview that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry did with Oprah Winfrey, which was just the other day. So I want to talk about this a little bit, and I want to challenge us all in a few ways of thinking. Now, I will say that I have a lot of different beliefs. I'm going to focus first on Meghan. So I have definitely some different beliefs than Meghan does. I was raised very differently. We have a very different set of values. I know she's been very clear and vocal that her main religion is really yoga, and that's not something I'm involved in or think is a religion in my world. I do believe that, breathing techniques and meditation is really great and that's biblical, but I'm not going to get into the whole idea of yoga because I don't do yoga, but she hasn't had a really religious upbringing. I think she went to a Catholic school, but religion wasn't practiced in her home. And so she's had, she and I will have some different opinions. Like, so we will come to our political opinions through massively different channels. I'm sure we agree on some things. I appreciate some of the things that she does believe. I bet she would appreciate some of the things I believe. But there's definitely a divide in some of the things that we believe. And then, of course, Prince Harry was born into the royal family, and that's massively different from anything in my world that I could even understand. Though I think about it because the monarchy is something that has been of interest to me, particularly more ancient monarchy studies, because I love just the anthropology of life, like just actually looking the epistemology of leadership and rulers and behavior. And to me, I think that's very interesting. It makes us who we are. It's the epistemology of like who we are. And I think that the monarchy has been something that's been a fascination to Americans because of that, because it's so different. We left Britain to be independent and to not be under a sovereignty of a monarchy. And we wanted to do things our own way. So America is just such a different place than Britain. And even though Britain is, modern and, Western Europe's it's modern, it's still Britain. It still takes pride in a previous mentality where America was formed in a new one. So when we see this interview, we're all just talking about it like everywhere on social media. It's everywhere. So I want to talk about a couple things. Some things I see that I think are really bothersome, and I want to challenge us to think about the main thing. Keep us at the main thing. Okay. I guess what I would like to say is I think it's important for us. Let's talk about, I'm just talking to the kingdom of believers. Okay. I think it's important that we're not so focused on who we think Meghan is. I think we can only really focus on the sovereignty we have, which is who we are. We have to think about who we are. And so I think that in that interview, I'll give you my personal opinion. This is just my personal opinion. I don't know these people. I have no sources. I have no way of knowing things. I'm only a behavioral specialist, which gives me a little edge here. And I've been watching this stuff play out. I'm very interested in what is this whole thing going to look like. I was very intrigued in the beginning when an American actress was going to marry into this British institution. Oh, it was interesting. In her interview, now my personal opinion, where, like I said, I don't know her. There were things that I really felt bad about for her, and then there were things that I didn't really believe her, and that is not really for me to say. I'm only sharing with you my gut feeling and my opinion. But not in the way of thinking somebody's a massive liar, though that might be true. I don't know. But I felt like there was a few clues that were I was tracking with. Like I was picking up on a few clues that the interview was quite vague. It had a lot of holes, a lot of questions weren't followed up on. And there was this, this happened, but I won't say who. Well, if you're not going to say who, don't say this happened. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that sort of thing. It's insightful. It's incendiary. It's like it's just going to confuse people. I don't think it benefits anybody. I don't think that anything came of this interview except a lot of backlash they're getting. And I think there was some truth to things they were sharing. And so I think it gets buried underneath the rhetoric of like this. So it's like they had this sort of plan of what to share and what to hold back. Now, are we all like that? Yes. We share what we want to share and we hold back what we hold back, and we have our secrets. And that's just humanity. But one of the things, just start with what I really didn't like, and then I actually want to talk about what's important. So when they asked her, do you have any regrets? So that's a big question. If anybody ever, now I'm not her and she's not me. So if I'm comparing myself to her, that's completely wrong. What I'm saying is from the perspective of that question, how might one answer that question? Now, if you have had an 18-month engagement and a 4-year experience with the Royal Families, that's 5.5 years. So in 5.5 years, do you have any regrets? Now, if somebody were to say that to me, and if somebody says, hey, do you have any regrets in the 5.5 years past? I would have a long list, right, of things that I had learned from or wish I hadn't done, regret doing, have had to apologize for, repent for, really change my ways, right? If you don't have any regrets, because what the answer that she gave was, she basically said, I regret trusting that they were going to protect me. What is she saying is, I regret that other people were bad and I just didn't hone in on that, which is very deflective of any responsibility of her making her own mistakes, because no one's perfect and everybody's going to make mistakes. And then she reveals that during her pregnancy, she was suicidal. Okay, so from my perspective, everything else fades off, and that's the focus, right? Because life is always the most important thing, even just that one life, hers. And it would potentially be her son Archie's life too. If she had killed herself, they both would have died. Life comes first. So what I don't like to see is social media trolling of being mean when somebody has revealed that. Now, whether it's true or not, I don't know. I don't ever like to think anybody would play that card and be lying. I don't get that, but I'm a therapist. I mean, I'm a mandated reporter. I'm trained to always take that very seriously. But that was brought up. And so I think that, you play that card and everybody does need to fall in line. Like, what if that had happened? So I would hope that because this is a life, a human. Now, even if she had done a lot of wrong things, even if she had been whatever done wrong or whatever, I don't know. With the amount of vitriol she experienced, I could see how when it seems in the whole world's turned against you and you're getting horrible press, whether you deserve it or not, I don't know that anybody in the world ever deserves that because no one's perfect. But I think that's got to be pretty heavy, right? And so it says in it's in Judaism, it's God looks at our strengths with, he looks at our weaknesses with his weak eye and our strengths with his strong eye. I think if he can do that with us, we can do that with other people. And so I want us to show up and be a different sort of people. I want to see us on social media speaking words of life, no matter what or how, whatever we think people are. When life is at stake, I hope we show up and we talk about life and we affirm life and we speak words of life. That's so important in this thing. This, and you have people, I don't watch that. I'm just too whatever. And maybe people don't watch it. They're not interested. But whenever something's impacting culture this much, I would hope believers would be flocking around and saying, okay, I want to be aware of this. Like, what's going on? Because I'm going to spend all this time studying the culture of Ephesus, then I really should know California, which is a central part of the microphone of America, right? What are these people going through? Now, what's interesting is that would be the idea of, instead of criticizing her, and we don't know her, like all that could be true that she said, but it would be more to invite her into life and not be ever shaming people. Shaming people is very wrong. Now, I'm not saying I've never shamed people. I mean, in politics, there might be a snarky comment that's kind of funny, and it can maybe seem shaming. And I don't mean it to. I mean political snark to be like a little more lighthearted way of something really depressing, at times. But I would be more inclined to, if I was sitting in front of Megan, to like, wow, that had to feel terrible that you actually didn't want to live anymore. And the next day, today, or shortly after the interview, they were interviewing her father. And he wasn't even talking about like he was still defending himself. So, okay, there's definitely a gap there in some way. Let's not let that gap be with us. Even if we don't agree with any of her beliefs or her actions or even whatever, we don't even know what those are. Like, we don't know what those actions are. We don't know. We weren't there. We just don't know. We're just guessing. But let me just tell you what I think about how this worked in the first place. Oh, sorry about my allergies. I always go through a box of Kleenex every time. Okay. But I want to share just what I think it happened if you want to look at this in a balanced way. And this is just an exercise of something that happens to be the hot topic and what's a balanced way to look at it. So here's how I see it. So I believe, from what I've seen and read about, the monarchy it's not a reigning monarchy, right? This is this institutional monarchy. And I look at it like it's an equation. It is a very strict equation. For it to do what it has to do, it has to be the way it is. And so this would be a rigid institution that funnels enormous amounts of money. And I'm not going to say that I agree with a lot of the British monarchy and the things that they might be talking about now or believing in or whatever. Like, I'm not on board. But as far as the institution itself, this is an equation. It's very, very different from the American equation. It's completely different. And I knew this when these two were engaged and about to get married. I predicted this to the letter, how it would happen. And the reason is because I understand undercurrents, and I'm a human behavior specialist. That's what I do. This is what I can do. And the American equation is liberty, freedom, and inertia forward. That's what we are. We're alpha dreamers. Okay. That is not what Britain is. This doesn't mean it doesn't have entrepreneurs and innovative people and creative people. Absolutely not. But it's different. It's very different. This is British duty and service and containment. And it's not alpha inertia. It's beta inertia. It's restraint, right? So that's one of the things you'll hear about Brits. They have the stiff upper lip. It's very much about containment. That's their strength, they view. Being emotive and vulnerable and out there and kind of out there would be the American way. Okay. But when you are an American actress, she kind of had the best of both worlds before she got married. She had some money, not much compared to most actors, and I had never heard of her before she started dating Harry, and I had never even heard of that show ever. I didn't know anything about it. So it's not that I'm the gauge of what's popular, but none of my friends had heard of her, and none of my friends had heard of her show. So I think her show was, very much a back burner. So I think she had a job that she could work at and make, some money and be a celebrity, on that lower rung, which is probably the best rung to be a celebrity. You get to do work in the acting field and show business and still have a private life and just live. I think she really had that. And I think that she had that American spirit of being like, she hadn't, she was more self-made. She wasn't born into the things she had accomplished. She did accomplish. And so I think that Harry was born into duty and service. And I think when he's visiting her and it's like, she's probably got this tasteful, well-appointed apartment that's cozy and homey and just free in this whole idea of what America is. And I think that's very provocative to someone from a contained system to just open up. And that particular guy, Harry, from my perspective, from what I'd seen in his life, his mother died when he was young and under horrible, circumstances with the media. And she had been so unhappy because of the media that getting away from that to some degree, because the American media is not much better, but I would say there's a different tone. Still mean, but a different tone. But am I going to call out someone in public that said I didn't even want to live because of these? I'm not going to add to those voices. Life is more important. And so I will say, too, that I did notice there were things where she said she was at an event and she was bawling and weeping, where I don't see any makeup smudges. So I don't know, but people can cry on the inside. But I do remember the birth footage for the first time we ever saw their baby, and they walked out, and she did look very overwhelmed to me. Like she had been through something. I could just tell by the way she walked, by the look on her face. She just felt very exposed. So there was something there. I don't know. I'm certainly not saying anything about anybody is true or not true. But when you take alpha glamour and you try to inject this into this like mediocre fame, right? And you try to inject this into a system of astounding fame, wealth, and stoic service, really is what that is. This is oil and vinegar, right? You're going to have to shake that up like crazy to ever make it combine. And I'll tell you what, the monarchy is like the Titanic. You just don't turn that thing around very quickly or at all, right? So you don't go into a system that's immovable and can only work a certain way for it to do what it does. Now, the idea of the monarchy is supposed to be, from what I understand, is that the whole reason for it to exist is not just for national identity, but with their history, but also for notoriety for charities. So the more popular they are and well-liked, and the more the mystique of the castles and the whole idea of a king and a queen and a prince and a princess, when they show up at a charity, other people show up and they give money. And it's for the good of the Commonwealth that they exist, because they're bringing, they're helping the Commonwealth be better and to be more cohesive and about community. It's about being together. And so that would be the goal of it. So it's kind of like you have a big account of money and then you live off the interest. So I feel like that's what the monarchy is. It's just not going to shift. It's not going to budge. But Americans think and believe, because we are taught this, you can do anything you want. You just go in, show them what you're made of, and you watch. Everything starts chipping away to your favor. And that's how she had lived her life. So anyway, that's my opinion of what was going on. And in that interview, I think on some level, there was just so many miscommunications between everybody. And I think, Harry kind of got involved in her way of thinking and lost that Britain way of thinking. And she was, I don't know that Americans can park it really into a system that structured and that stoic, that service oriented. Hollywood is a place where you serve yourself. You go and you get famous and everyone loves you. Where this would be, we are duty bound and we're going to do the best we can for the people. And yeah, they love us, but boy, if you're not on good terms with the press, they hate you. And I think that there's an indignation that came in Meghan where it's like, why are you saying, my avocado toast is harming the world's children, and the Duchess Kate's avocado toast is good for morning sickness. So she was seeing these things, but I think these are non sequiturs because I think they were different things, different actions, a whole 100 million things nobody could ever describe ever in a million years of what happened and who didn't say what and who didn't call that day. And if they had, maybe this mood wouldn't have been that. And this person misunderstood this word. And then it became this big thing. And that's why we don't eat off the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because we don't know. Neither do they. They just don't know. Everybody in that situation, I'm sure, is just dizzy. Now, to the extent that there was racism toward her in that family, if that happened, horrible. I just think that's terrible and how painful. But I don't know those people, and I have never been in their presence, never met them, never been within miles of it. I just don't even know. So I'm just trying to say this is an exercise for believers to show up without an opinion and just say the weightier matter is life. And there was an expression that life would have been snuffed out because of the words of others, even if that person had done wrong things, which I'm not saying I don't know. I'm just saying we don't know. Make that an exercise for you to just lift 900 opinions off something you don't know about and say, what's the biggest thing? Life. And be an inviter to somebody. Be an invitation to something better than whatever all that is. Because I think that, and it's going to talk, and this kind of goes into what I want to talk about in the Brit Kadashah, because a lot of people think that they'll say, oh, I don't feel sorry for those people or for her because she's so rich. They have so much money. I just have to say this because you can have money and have a lot of problems. Money doesn't solve all your problems. Now, here's the thing. We're not to worship or idolize money, but you're kind of doing that if you're saying she should have no problems if she has money. Because what you're saying is money solves everything. That is giving money credit it does not deserve and is not true. And in fact, having money can create many, many problems. And a lot of people will say, boy, remember when we only had $10 a week extra? How happy we were in our marriage, and now we're billionaires and we're not happy. Like, this is a common theme that we see all the time. These are romantic stories we love, is returning back to simplicity. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say money's an idol, and at the same time, why would any emotional issues be present with someone with money? They have no problems. That's ridiculous. Listen to yourself. But in the portion, it's this really complicated, I would say, like, I get it because I see it through an attachment lens, and I'm going to share that with you. But the dishonest manager is the parable that is being talked about here. Yeshua is talking about this story, and it confuses a lot of people. It's Luke 16, 1 through 13, and it goes on past, and there's many points to make, but we'll go to 13. But this is what this parable is. 16:1, Luke. He also said to the disciples, there was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting the rich man's possessions. And he called him and said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your management. So report what you did, for you can no longer be a manager. So tell us everything you did and you're fired. And the manager said to himself, now Yeshua's telling us this story. This is what the manager said to himself, according to Yeshua's parable. What shall I do since my master is taking the management away from me? Okay, just stop here for 1 sec. Human beings saying, whoa, I've made a lot of mistakes, and now it's caught up to me. Have you ever been like that in your life? You've made a lot of mistakes and it catches up to you, and you incur consequences in your life that you can't handle. The Father won't give you anything more than you can bear, but you will certainly give yourself a lot more. And I know I have. And many times have I said, Father, I have incurred consequences I can't bear. Okay. Let's let go of our pride and admit that right now, right here. And the manager said to himself, what shall I do since my master is taking the management away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. Okay, so that's interesting, because what is he saying? I've lost all other skills, and I've never developed other skills because I was depending on all this easy money that he was nefariously accruing. And because that brought me the false self of the rich man. Remember the rich man that had to go sell his possessions? It's not a sin to be rich. It's a sin to only know yourself as rich, right? I'm ashamed to beg. I don't have humility because money took it away. I gave my humility away. And I nope, I'm the rich man. I don't beg. I'm wealthy. I'm not a beggar. I have decided what to do so that when I am removed from management, people may receive me into their houses. Okay, so I'm obviously going to need community. I'm going to need people to like me. How will I accomplish this? Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I have a plan. So I can have friends. I need people. I admit it. I need other people. So summoning his master's debtors, the people that owed the money that he was in the role of managing. This is what he did. He summons them one by one. And he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said 100 measures of oil. So he says, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. So really fast, just reduce that by half. Sit down quickly. Okay. Then he says to another, and how much do you owe? And he says 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. The master, now, so what's interesting, he gave the first guy half. He only reduced the other from 100 to 80. Okay. And the first one, he said, hey, real quick, do this. And then maybe he thought, okay, maybe, because I think what was happening was he was taking commissions for himself from these people. So now he's taking out of his own pocket, if you will, and saying, here, I'm going to solve this problem. The master commended the dishonest manager for his shrewdness. Okay. Commended the dishonest guy for being shrewd. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the sons of the light. These people are more manipulative and more able to deal with stuff. And he says, and I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous wealth. So when it fails, they may receive you into their dwelling. So when all the money fails you, and it will, right? I think that's sarcastic. He's like, hey, this has been the world you've lived in. Make it work. The big picture here was that the people weren't defrauded anymore with money. He wasn't pocketing and siphoning off that money anymore. So the good thing was that the people weren't being taken advantage of. And he was using his shrewdness that he learned on the street. And he's like, hey, kingdom people who see the kingdom operate in a whole different way. But you took your streetwise stuff, you figured out how to help the people, and in the end, you really did it for yourself because you don't want to be without community, because you are conditioned and designed to need and function in community. Behaviorism, right? So he says, and I tell you, make friends for yourself by means of unrighteous wealth, so when it fails, they can receive you into their eternal dwellings. One who is faithful in very little is also faithful in very much. And who is dishonest in very little is also dishonest in much. If then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who is ever going to entrust you to true riches? And if you had not been faithful in which was another's, who will give you that which is your own? Reaping what you sow, right? No servant can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other, and you cannot serve God and money. Whew, that is big stuff. It makes me think of this interview. It makes me think of all of these things at play. It's like this guy is like, you haven't been found faithful. So you are now removed from this authority. You can't handle it. It's not for you anymore. You're taken out now. And you can't serve two masters. That's humanism and humanity. You cannot have and be both. You can't affirm yourself and be affirmed by God. It doesn't exist. You can believe God only, or you can only believe yourself. There's only one opinion. Now, if you come into agreement with God's opinion about you, blessed be the name. If you create your own that happens to agree with his, because that's humanism disguised as religion. You see how sneaky that is? Humility is when we outsource our opinion that it's already made for us, and then we decide, yeah, I concur. I am completely in line with my creator the best I can. And each year I just learn how to agree with him more. That's what I do. I learn how to interpret what he's saying better, and I learn how to agree with it more and find areas where I've really kind of been on my own. And I've kind of been my own God. I think that's powerful. There's more to that story, but it's harder for the rich person to see the kingdom of God because they've got a lot to prop them up and give them mojo that other people don't have. The more props you have, the less you're exercising that muscle. I can't dig, right? I'm too ashamed to beg. I don't even know how to have humility anymore. Okay, do you get me? So this takes me to where you see Nicodemus, like I mentioned him before, where he says, this Pharisee named Nicodemus, who is a member of the Jewish ruling council, and he comes to Yeshua at night and he says, Rabbi, we know that you're a teacher who's come from God. I'm reading other passage. This is not part of the portion. For no one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. This kind of goes into further in the dishonest manager story, is like, don't wait for signs and all this stuff to see like God approves of you because you have money, because you can get money and not have God's approval. Like, I think that's pretty clear. And Yeshua says, very truly I say to you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they're born again. And he says, but how can someone be born when they're old? Nicodemus asks, surely they can't enter a second time into their mother's womb to be born. And this is what Yeshua says. Very truly, I tell you, no one can enter the kingdom of God unless they're born of water and the Spirit. Just like we've already seen. Flesh gives birth to flesh. Spirit gives birth to spirit. You can have all the money in the world and be so lacking. And you can have no money and be rich. And you can have so much money and be so rich inside, right? You should not be surprised by my saying you must be born again. The wind blows wherever it pleases. You hear its sound, but you can't tell tell where it comes from or where it's going. So is everyone who's born of the Spirit. You're not in charge of this spiritual experience. You participate and you submit your free will, and he takes you where you need to be, like a little kid. Be born again. Be a little kid again. Right? The kingdom is within you. It's in your midst. And then he says, Nicodemus says, you're Israel's teacher. Or he says, how can this be? And Yeshua's like, you're one of the teachers. And you don't even know this? So anyway, it goes in. It's really cool. I really wish you could read, go ahead and read the rest of that up through, like, it's John 3, verse 1 through 21. Read all that. It's very, very interesting. because the word for see, the kingdom, is this metaphorical meaning. It's Strong's 3708, and it means to see with the mind, metaphorically to perceive inward, a spiritual perception. So born again isn't like, it's something that being born again, it enables us to see in the midst what the Spirit has given us as children, and not as I'm in charge. We are not in control. We are not God. When we eat off that tree and we think we are, we're in trouble. It will kill us. So yeah, so anyway, there's a lot more there, but the kingdom of God is in your midst. It's not outside of you. It's not in anybody else around you can take, right? The kingdom is within you. So when we see things in culture, don't be so pious you don't want to study culture. And when you're reading the Bible, be pious enough to study their culture. Like, do you understand? The things happening around you is a way to measure what's going on around me. What's the tone? Everybody's heard of this article, this interview. Everybody's heard of it. Maybe form an opinion that isn't an opinion, but focuses on life. Takes the more important role of being the life affirmer of a person that God made and loves. And then just check your opinion at the door. There's a lot of things going on there. And I think it's an opportunity for us to rise above a lot of jealousies and a lot of angst and a lot of judgment, and just fall into that grace of like, we're all in grace, you know, and the Father will work all these things out. But I just think that today's Brit Hadashah portion was really resonating with me, with what I was seeing that I needed to see about what culture was providing me with, this opportunity of how to see who am I going to be? Not who is she? Who am I going to be? Am I going to be a shamer? Am I going to be mean? Am I going to look at something massively scary and look at life as being the top priority? That's what I want to do. Yes, I do have to take all kinds of knowledge of good and evil junk and let it drain out of this tub here, because I want to judge so many things. And like I said, I shared with you my bias and like a few clues I picked up on that I felt like, don't like that really the way she said that. Really think this probably was really hard for her. It's a combination. You know, they say there's 3 sides to everything. Theirs, and God's, right? And that's how that's going to be. So let's look at the chat just for a second. Ooh, I had a lot of comments here. This is exciting. Hi, Bob Hall. Relaxing, watching Shalom. Dinner bell here at last. Humanism is a religion. Yes, it is, Bob. It so is. People don't get that. I get it. Barb here at last. Hi, Barb. So nice to see you. And they're saying hi to each other. Hi, Ellen. So good to see you. Clint, Gilbert, I can relate. Not everyone can be as perfect as me. I don't, me neither. You and I agree on that. Same, never heard of her before, Harry. Yeah. So Barb, yeah, right. I'd never heard of her. But I will say there was a time where I was like, I don't know if this person is just so bad that I actually wonder if I want to take her online class to learn like what kind of skills, like, you know what I mean? You just wonder. This is a person who in our culture rose to fame for a reason. And the reason is to look in the mirror and see ourselves through those experiences and how do we show up. And so I think it's very easy to judge very rich people, very famous people. I think it's also easy to worship and like, not worship, like, but to idolize, to really want to follow them. And I think there's all kinds of that going on. And so people are very polarized and they've had very bad backlash. But the exercise was to forget who they are and decide and help the Father show you who you are, who he made you to be. And to see these other people through his eyes. These are people he loves. And for us to just like toss their reputations around like a football, because we really don't understand. And the press does build you up so they make more money when they tear you down, because the better you are, the more shocking it is when you're not perfect and you do wrong things or whatever. So anyway, that's what kind of was coming to me today. And I wanted to share that. I wanted to just go through some of these ideas about humanity versus humanism and really always clarify my position and help you with some of those definitions so that you can clarify like what the positions are, what the definitions of these things are. Because, we can get lost in semantics and people can think, oh, she's such a nice humanist, when what they mean to say is, oh, she's a great humanitarian. That's different. We're not supposed to have humanity. No, we're not supposed to have humanism. The ity is the status. The ism is the philosophy and the leaning of belief. And it's where we rest our value system. If you rest your value system on the values he tells you to have because they're his values, you're humble. And if you come out as being good, that's great. That's how great and loving our God is. We have a long way to go for sure, but we are getting there. So I really want to thank you for joining me today. I won't be having a show next week because I will be traveling. But the next week, come back and we will have another fun time. But finish reading this Dishonest Manager and wade through that because it's interesting because we'll discuss it. Maybe we'll finish the other part of it because it's such an interesting story. And there's so many things that I feel like are going on there. So we'll cover that maybe the next time. But anyway, I will see you in 2 weeks. And until then, remember, the future begins now. Bye.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.